What if I told you that the most devastating moment in anime history wasn't a death, wasn't a betrayal, but a single question that shattered a man's entire worldview? What if the most powerful transformation ever animated came not from gaining new strength, but from losing everything that once defined purpose? Picture this: you're watching what you think is just another revenge story. A young Viking warrior consumed by hatred, living only to kill the man who murdered his father. Standard stuff, right? But then something happens that changes everything you thought you understood about strength, purpose, and what it means to be human. The moment Thorfinn finally gets his revenge within reach, the moment he's trained his entire life for, something breaks inside him that can never be fixed. And that breaking becomes the beginning of the most profound existential journey ever put to screen. I've watched Vinland Saga dozens of times, and each viewing reveals another layer of what Thorfinn's crisis really represents. It's not just about a Viking finding peace. It is about every single one of us who has ever stared into the void and asked the question that terrifies us most: what if everything I have lived for means nothing? The first time we meet Thorfinn, he's a child whose world revolves around stories of Vinland, a peaceful land beyond the sea where swords are unnecessary and conflicts don't exist. His father Thors had filled his imagination with dreams of a place where strength meant protecting, not destroying. But childhood innocence has a way of dying violently. When Askeladd kills Thors, something fundamental shifts in Thorfinn's universe. The boy who once dreamed of peace becomes a weapon forged in hatred. For years, he follows his father's killer, not out of loyalty, but out of a twisted desire for the perfect moment of revenge. Here is what most viewers miss on their first watch: Thorfinn's obsession with killing Askeladd isn't really about his father anymore. It becomes his entire identity, his reason for existing, his answer to the question, why am I here? Every morning he wakes up with purpose. Every battle he fights has meaning. Every breath he takes is justified by the singular goal that burns inside him like a sacred flame. But what happens when that flame goes out? The genius of Vinland Saga lies not in the revenge itself, but in what comes after. When Askeladd finally dies, not by Thorfinn's blade but in a moment of political sacrifice, something inside our protagonist dies too. And what is left behind is perhaps the most terrifying thing a human being can face: complete emptiness. Imagine spending years, decades even, building your entire existence around one purpose. Every decision, every sacrifice, every moment of suffering justified by this one burning goal. Now imagine waking up one day and realizing that goal is not just unachievable, but meaningless. This is exactly what Tolstoy experienced at the height of his success, and it's exactly what destroys Thorfinn after Askeladd's death. The parallel between these two figures, separated by centuries, becomes impossible to ignore. Both had built their lives around something external, something that gave them identity and purpose. Tolstoy had his fame, his wealth, his literary achievements. Thorfinn had his revenge, his skill as a warrior, his hatred as fuel. When those external pillars crumble, what is left is a question that echoes through the ages: who am I when I am nothing? Thorfinn's breakdown on the farm isn't just physical exhaustion or emotional trauma. It's a complete spiritual collapse. He's not just tired from fighting, he's tired from existing. Every morning becomes a battle just to find a reason to open his eyes. Sound familiar? It should, because this is the same abyss that Tolstoy stared into when he realized all his achievements meant nothing. The same void that makes him avoid ropes and weapons, terrified of what he might do to escape the suffocating meaninglessness. But here's where both stories take an unexpected turn. For Thorfinn, salvation doesn't come from finding a new enemy to fight or a new goal to chase. It comes from the most unlikely source: the very people he spent years viewing as beneath him. The slaves, the farmers, the simple folk who worked the land with their hands. Just as Tolstoy found meaning in observing the faith of Russian peasants, Thorfinn discovers something profound in watching Einar plant seeds in the earth. These people, who by Viking standards should be worthless, possess something that all of Thorfinn's warrior training never gave him: the ability to create instead of destroy. There is a moment when Thorfinn watches Einar tend to a sick plant with the same dedication Thorfinn once reserved for perfecting his killing techniques. And in that moment, something shifts. The realization hits him like a physical blow. He spent his entire life becoming very good at ending things, but he has no idea how to help anything grow. This is the first crack in the wall of his despair, not because he's found a new purpose, but because he's glimpsed what purpose could actually look like. The transformation doesn't happen overnight. Thorfinn doesn't wake up one morning suddenly enlightened and ready to embrace pacifism. Instead, he goes through what can only be described as a spiritual detox. Years of violence have poisoned his soul, and healing takes time. During the farm arc, we watch Thorfinn learn to be human again. He learns that hands can plant as well as kill. He learns that strength can protect the weak instead of dominating them. Most importantly, he learns that true courage isn't the absence of fear in battle, but the willingness to choose peace when violence would be easier. This mirrors Tolstoy's own radical transformation. Both men didn't just change their minds about violence, they changed their entire understanding of what strength means. Tolstoy gave up his wealth and titles to live simply among peasants. Thorfinn trades his identity as a warrior for something much harder, the identity of a protector who refuses to kill. But the most profound parallel between their journeys comes in how they handle the guilt of their past actions. Thorfinn carries the weight of every life he's taken. In his dreams, the dead come to him, not seeking revenge, but asking the question that haunts him most: what was it all for? He can't answer them, because he's asking himself the same question. Tolstoy, too, was tormented by what he saw as a wasted life. All those years spent in pursuit of empty achievements while real suffering existed around him. All those opportunities to love and serve that he'd missed while chasing fame and recognition. For both men, redemption doesn't come from forgetting their past, but from facing it honestly and choosing to live differently going forward. When Thorfinn finally articulates his dream of Vinland, he's not just talking about a geographical location. He's talking about a state of being where the cycle of violence that defined his life can finally be broken. A place where children don't grow up planning revenge for their murdered fathers. A place where strength is measured by what you build, not what you destroy. This vision sustains him through moments of doubt, through the temptation to return to old ways, through the mockery of those who see his pacifism as weakness. Similarly, Tolstoy's vision of a life based on love and service gave him strength to endure criticism from his wife, his church, and his society. Both men understood that true revolution begins in the human heart, not on the battlefield. The most powerful moment in Vinland Saga isn't when Thorfinn kills his first enemy, or even when he achieves his revenge. It's when he chooses to take a beating rather than fight back, when he looks his attacker in the eye and sees not an enemy, but another human being trapped in the same cycle of violence that once consumed him. In that moment, Thorfinn becomes more dangerous to the warrior culture than any sword could ever be. He becomes proof that there's another way to live. Thorfinn's crisis teaches us that the most profound battles aren't fought with weapons, but within the human soul. The hardest enemy to defeat isn't the one standing in front of you, but the one staring back from the mirror. Both Thorfinn and Tolstoy discovered that the answer to life's meaning isn't found in conquest or achievement, but in the radical act of choosing love over hatred, creation over destruction, service over self-interest. Their stories remind us that it's never too late to change, never too late to choose a different path, never too late to ask ourselves, what kind of person do I want to be? And perhaps most importantly, they show us that the greatest strength isn't the power to destroy your enemies, but the courage to transform them into friends. The question isn't whether you're strong enough to fight. The question is whether you're brave enough to stop fighting and start building something better.